Hello, this is Alex R. Mayer, host of the long-running Doomed Planet podcast. We talk about crime in the music scene, Seattle history, shit like that. I know I promised that I would stop talking about the 1990s Seattle music scene, but 1980s Seattle music guy Daniel House has a new podcast, and his first guest on his very first episode was Scotty Crane, my old pal. And I can't resist, talking about this. So welcome to episode 133. Not Dead, Survivors of Seattle's Music Scene.
Doomed Planet, Obituaries for the Damned. Podcast, shout out.
Welcome to The Creative Asylum, a weekly podcast that digs deep into the minds of visionary creators of all stripes. Musicians, actors, filmmakers, writers, artists, cartoonists, and cultural disruptors.
Cultural destructors. Okay, so The Creative Asylum debuted in September of last year with an episode featuring an interview with Scotty Crane. You might know Scotty as the guy that sold pornography that his dad made, featuring his dad, and his father, Bob Crane from Hogan's Heroes, who died in a grisly murder related to some sex videotaping. Scotty worked for free for me on some projects, and he gets a free pass. Mostly. I will say that it's hard to figure out what he's ever done. Like, he owned a recording studio, and then they keep talking about this radio show, Shaken, Not Stirred, that he did with some other guy. I can't find proof that, like, Scotty's resume is very spotty. Heroin addict for many years. That'll take you out of the job picture, but Scotty, responsible for designing and building Soundhouse Studios, according to the podcast notes, Jack and Dino's home for over a decade. He didn't design or build anything, but his mom's money provided that. And I think that's great. As far as Seattle rich kids go, I'd take Scotty Crane over, some Microsoft progeny any day. And his mom, of course, was the one that caused his dad to divorce his first wife, with which he had 3 kids. And she was the buxom co-star with his dad, Bob, on Hogan's Heroes.
Well, here we are at the beginning of our wedding, which we had no control over. We weren't even given a guest list to approve. We were allowed to invite family members. That's my sister walking with producer Eddie Feldman. My daughter, the flower girl, Melissa, called her Mitz, and Bob and I walked down the so-called aisle together. This wedding was being performed on a sound stage next door to Hogan's set, and at the time it was the first only actual wedding performed in Hollywood on a sound stage. Everything was a phony wedding, a dramatic wedding.
Scotty moved to L.A. to become an actor, and he's been on some soap operas and other stuff. Paul Schrader made a movie about his dad, and Scotty didn't like that, and I think he actually disrupted the premiere of that movie. Scotty had his own version that he wanted made. He's a wackadoodle.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Smile. It's a critical time for me. I need something big.
This could be what you're looking for.
This character, Hogan, he's quick on his toes, he's hip, he's a con artist, but I think it's what I've been working toward my whole career.
I am such a fan. I just wonder.
A picture together? You betcha. Smile. Photography's always been my thing. I'm Bob Crane.
John Carpenter. If you like photography, you wouldn't believe this new equipment they sent me. It'll blow your mind.
What will we do with it?
Home movies.
So just some background information. I arrived in Seattle in 1990. A podcast is always more interesting when you witnessed events firsthand. And, a lot of the people at that point were already in rehab. The late 80s saw an explosion in the Seattle music scene, although there weren't that many places where people could actually play. The results of that, of course, were grunge. Chris Hanzik and Tina Casale started CZ Records in 1985. Their now legendary, that's in air quotes, Deep Six album. That was the earliest grunge compilation. Soundgarden, Melvins, Green River, Skin Yard, a band that Daniel House was in, and Malfunction, all legendary bands. Skin Yard Daniel House was in that band with Jack Endino. So it's all very a wild and thriving music scene. Everyone knew each other, of course, especially back in the rocket ship to fame of Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and Nirvana days. So this album, Deep Six, by the way, I've heard it. I've listened to it on vinyl. It is grunge. It's more like mud. It sounds awful. It is just terrible. The songs might be good, but it's hard to... It's just like fuzzy, grungy. I don't know how to describe this in musical terms. I'm not a musician, and that has been great for me in Seattle, because it kind of... If you show up in Seattle in 1990 and you're a musician, all these guys are gonna, be suspicious of you, and obviously. And then when the big money started coming in, well, all these 80s people disappeared, really. And who can blame them? All these people are coming into town. They might want something from you, right? Gritty, unrestrained, dark, and heavy, melding the styles of the Stooges, Aerosmith, and punk, but distinctly Seattle. Okay. Anyway, Daniel House ends up buying CZ Records from these guys. He was also the director of sales for Sub Pop Records, right? And touring with his band. I think he's the bass player. So in 1990, he leaves Sub Pop. Maybe bad timing, because Sub Pop is going to blow up then. But in 1990, they had no money and were struggling. Pretty soon, CZ Records had 13 staff members. To give credit to Daniel House, he had bands on his label featuring human females, a rarity in the Seattle music scene. Now, 7 Year Bitch, Hammerbox being two, and of course the Gits. They put out a 7-inch called Teriyaki Asthma, which had Nirvana, L7, Babes in Toyland. Okay, so the ultimate hipster cred, the ultimate grunge, early grunge guy, and now he's doing a podcast, and he is not that thrilling of a host, and he's falling into the trap. Of course, I'm in that trap now. It's like an endless loop of going back to the old days, and of course, well, that's where he's going to find a lot of his guests, because he knows all these people. Long story short, big money from record companies came into Seattle one day for some reason, and CZ got a huge record deal and a bunch of cash out front. According to House, he kind of got screwed over by these record labels. According to some bands that I won't mention, who are friends of mine, there was some trouble getting royalty checks out of Daniel House. Daniel blames the major labels. They blame him. It seems like there's no more bad blood. This is ancient history, and now all these people, or some of them, are appearing as guests on his podcast. But the two bands that I know for a fact he fucked over are not going to appear. But what can you do? You know, you're in a punk band and you're fucking around with an indie label doing this and that, and it becomes very serious. Like, this is serious business when you are selling millions of albums and bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars to giant corporations. And, you know, even the best of them are not going to be perfect. And House was not perfect. I do like how Daniel House has some feminists appearing on his show. Lori Barbero from Babes in Toyland. So Jack Endino was a early guest. Producer, recorded hundreds of records, including for Nirvana, of course. Doug Prey was an episode I listened to. Doug Prey is the documentary filmmaker who made the documentary about the grunge scene called Hype. And this is, he's a great guy. I like him. He's not a radical, though. He admits this on the show. He's more of a mainstream guy. It's interesting, this movie called Hype, I went to the premiere. It must have been in 1996 or 1997 at the Uptown Cinema in Queen Anne in Seattle. And it was kind of like, well, it's over. And that was, 1996. Well, the music scene is over. This is like a retro thing now. It's like we're looking at ancient history in this movie. He had a rough time making the movie, raising money, and pretty much he did what any good journalist would do. He embedded himself and spent a great deal of time with people. And so the notoriously reclusive, grunge stars, rock stars, slowly warmed up to him. They spent I think they spent $80,000 shooting some footage, and then they still didn't have a budget to complete the film. Some of that footage was at Rock Candy and features the Gits. And of course, that's used endlessly now whenever anyone is talking about the Gits or Mia Zapata, this high quality footage with sound right off the boards. I'm glad we have that.
And now a word from our sponsor.
That's punk rock, and one day they just sort of started going, and that was grunge.
The most noisy, most absurd, the heaviest thing that was going.
The Northwesters were flying saucers. The term flying saucers was coined. It's the serial killer capital of the world. I mean, the Manson family used to vacation up this way.
My life has just been so weird. I have a scientific mind, and I have this total open art mind, where I don't have any boundaries. I just I make the paintings I want to make. I make the tree houses I want to make. And working with Ben, we make the albums we want to make, It's really kind of a lot of freedom.
Roderick Wolgamott from Sky Cries Mary. Don't get me started. Okay, you did. So Sky Cries Mary was Roderick and Anissa Romero and band, and they were pretty big in Seattle in the early 90s. I hated them so much. I thought they were the most pretentious fuckheads, and then their music I thought was horrible. They had a great guitarist, but it was like Roderick and Anissa, the singers, caterwauling and wailing, and well, it turns out he's an interesting guy and an intellect. I never would have known, but after his music days, he broke up with Anissa and the band broke up. I hope I got her name right. I guess nobody cares. He builds tree houses for rock stars, like custom, really fancy tree houses for Sting and Bono and stuff. And he also, other than Kim Thayil, he might be the only Seattle music guy from the 80s that attended college. So, yeah, good for him, man. Moon Zappa. Okay, so he's got Daniel House, to his credit, getting some, some good hipsters here. Moon Zappa, of course, Frank's daughter. I don't think I listened to that episode. Jeff Pincus of the Butthole Surfers and the Melvins. I started listening to that. The guy's kind of a meathead. And, musicians are in their own world. And again, some of them are not that well read or whatever. Peter Bagg of Hate Comics.
It's always a mistake to try to fit into a pre-existing box. Just follow whatever it is sitting in your head. If you feel like there's just something that has to come out, then you know you're on the right track.
I did listen to that. I don't like his comics anymore. I really loved them when he was in Weirdo magazine, R. Crumb's magazine that he actually had Peter edit for a while. Very influential late 80s or mid to late 80s underground comic. Peter says on this podcast that much of his job was rejecting bad comics. So Peter Bagg is a libertarian, self-described libertarian. He's even done artwork for Reason magazine, the libertarian magazine. And so that it's hard to know how to forgive that. Like, this guy is like, he's so surrounded by artists and musicians and creative people, and yet he's like, I worked hard for what I got, and I don't want to pay taxes, and rich people especially shouldn't pay taxes. Like, okay, buddy. Victor Krummenacher of Camper Van Beethoven. Again, the average listener who's not a 90s hipster might not know some of these bands or cartoonists. I really liked the interview Daniel House did on his podcast, The Creative Asylum. Hiro Yamamoto, the first bass player for Soundgarden. I always mythologized Hiro, thinking, well, he missed out on being a rich rock star, but he's this intellectual, and he went on to become a physician or something. But no, it turns out he's just a rock and roll meathead, and he's not bitter about missing out on the millions, but not overtly. But and he said, from the thunder of early grunge to the expansive psych rock of Truly. No one, Truly does not make a huge amount of money. I don't know if he even makes a living as a musician. Again, nice guy, but like, I thought it would be something else. And then, of course, Ken Stringfellow of the Posies.
My songwriting style has changed a little bit. I mean, I have a different, emotional portal and that I'm going through than the last time. But some of the things that are fresh now, have to do with, this real kind of confrontation with mortality in a way that I hadn't experienced before.
Ken Stringfellow, musicians will have heard of him. He's a really good musician. He's also an alleged sex pest. October 25th, 2021. As sexual misconduct allegations dog Ken Stringfellow of the Posies, the band breaks up. The Posies, well known if you are a hipster. Otherwise, the average person might not know. But, did he consider himself the coolest person in Seattle? And other people, of course, considered that as well, believed that as well. It's from KUOW. Warning, this story contains depictions of sexual violence. The women who say Ken Stringfellow hurt them, bit them, forced himself... this guy is horrible. The second one, who was sleeping in a hotel room upstairs when this occurred, said she was also in an abusive relationship. A third woman, Stringfellow, responded to the allegations at the Bothell recording studio where he works and lives part-time. I have never been into anything kinky, into anything rough, he said. I experienced extreme violence firsthand as a teen. I'm sensitive to aggression, and it's not something I can be around. I'm not down with violence. I don't want to hurt anyone ever. So that's his denial of these claims. This is how Stringfellow presents to his audience as well, according to Ashley Hiroko and Isolde Raftery of KUOW. He is tall but slouches, as though to make himself appear smaller, and speaks in a hesitant and soft-spoken manner. In one song he wrote, "You who reject masculinity, baby, I'm with you as soon as you forsake virility and aggression too." Those lyrics could be an anthem for indie pop, a genre that was, in a sense, a response to the coke and sex-fueled heyday of rock and roll, the cock rock of the 70s. Now in October of 2024, 3 years after sex assault allegations, Ken Stringfellow plans to perform in Seattle. Okay, so he's got some time off. He's trying to rehabilitate his broken image. And he appears on Daniel House's podcast, The Creative Asylum. I did force myself to listen to this one. Very disingenuous. They never refer to these allegations other than to say it was a learning experience and you're always learning and growing. Being musically talented is great, but if you're a bad person, then, slag off with walnuts. Okay, another episode, Adam Tepedelen. Adam Tepedelen. He's a writer, chronicled the Seattle music scene along with a bunch of other writers back in the day. He's the co-author of the new Kim Thayil, guitarist from Soundgarden, biography coming out soon. Since the Doom Planet podcast is not just about obituaries, we also review rock star biographies. We're going to have to get sucked back into grunge again when that book comes out and review it. Very much admire Kim and the way he tunes his guitar, and, Soundgarden, mass respect for them in general. Punk pioneer and Latina feminist Alice Bagg appeared on the show. Laurie Barbero of Babes in Toyland, alternative rock. She was born in Minneapolis. She's Filipino and Scandinavian descent. And she was involved in, of course, the Riot Girl scene. Molly Newman is pretty cool. And again, kudos to Daniel House for featuring women on his podcast about Seattle music. She was in Bratmobile, which is one of these indie Riot Girl bands, on one of these hipster record labels, Kill Rock Stars, K Records. She played a show with Bikini Kill. And again, the Riot Girl scene, interesting. I'm not sure what actual riots these women were involved with. But, good to see some feminism as like a side shoot of the Seattle or, regional music scene. So in addition to being a musician, she's had a good career in the music industry. She co-owned Lookout Records, started a couple indie record labels. She worked for E-Music before moving to Rhapsody. She was appointed vice president of the American Association of Independent Music. She graduated from a chef's training program at the Natural Gourmet Institute in New York and started a personal chef catering and health consulting company focusing on natural and whole foods in Brooklyn called the Simple Social Kitchen. That's from Wikipedia. She was appointed head of music for Kickstarter. Good for her. Making It. An intimate documentary of the Seattle indie rock and punk scene. A new book by Bootsy Holler, the rock photographer. I remember her hanging out with Ken Stringfellow a lot back in the old days. None of that is mentioned in this podcast. I noticed that Bootsy has been on a couple other podcasts promoting her book. Again, I like to say, still photography requires the least talent of any art form. You take a machine and press a button and point it at something. And of course, if you're a photojournalist, that's different. You embed, like Larry Clark embedded himself with teenage meth users in Tulsa, Oklahoma back in the 70s. And some great photographs came out of that. Bootsy embedded herself in the Seattle music scene. She showed up in 1992, so she was not there for the early shit. And I always thought she was kind of odd. Good for her. She moved to L.A., and I learned from this podcast her husband is a well-known filmmaker. You look on the Internet Movie Database, he's produced and directed a bunch of stuff, so good for her. She's not, still stuck in bumfuck Seattle like me. She went out into the world and she married well. Chad Channing was Nirvana's first drummer. Interviewed by Daniel House, he does not seem to be bitter that he missed out on the riches. I think he claims that the breakup was mutual. And of course, he left the band before he played on the Bleach album, which went on to sell 1 million copies. And, it was hipster gold at the time. I remember coming to Seattle in 1990. I heard Bleach because a friend of mine gave me that cassette. Bleach by Nirvana and Jane's Addiction, Nothing Shocking, I think it was. And I had no knowledge of the music scene. No clue of any band. Like, Nirvana might have been the only Seattle band I'd ever heard of. I have a burner Facebook account with a lot of these grunge guys on here, including Chad Channing. And yeah, he's kind of a rock and roll meathead, not a brilliant person, but he is a really good musician. He's a classically trained and a multi-instrumentalist. He's got some good Nirvana stories. Nirvana is basically Kurt Cobain and his backup band. And of course, Chad wanted to write music and contribute that way. And they're like, no, this is Kurt's thing. And so that didn't work out. Unfortunately for Chad, he toured in 2018. Wow, even that is ancient history. Where has the time gone? He toured with Bleach, a worldwide Nirvana tribute band based in Rome, Italy. Since 2012, they have been spreading the Nirvana legacy. Daniele Tofani, vocals and guitar, Mattia De Iorco, bass, and Roberto Doggy Velocia, drums.
Nothing left to say that can be said.
I went to the website for Bleach and I watched their video. It's horrifying. And they have a video, featuring Chad Channing, and he's what, a 60-year-old man who doesn't look that great anymore, and weird. I think that Bleach video is the most offensive thing I've seen in years. And I've spent a couple years watching, images of babies with their bodies shredded and their faces burned off, and grandmas running away from drones and being shot in the back of the head by drones. No, this is worse.
On me.
They asked if
if I wanted to jam with them. So I was like, sure, let's get together and jam. And we set up a time, and I think our first rehearsals might have been in Tacoma, where Chris was living at the time. And so we had a really good jam. It was really fun. They were like, oh, so, what do you think? I said, oh, it was pretty fun. I really enjoyed it. And they're like, cool, would you want to come back and jam again? Sure. And that's kind of how it went. It's just like it was coming back and jamming. And I never recall a point where it was like, okay, you're officially in the band. It was more like, let's just keep jamming. And so I kind of ended up in the band.
Okay, everybody, thank you for listening to Not Dead Survivors of Seattle's Music Scene. Where did I come up with that title? Oh, the people Daniel House interviews here are still with us, and there are so many of their compatriots not being interviewed because they are gone. See you next time. Bye.
Find out more at doomplanet.com.